everyone. This is Jody Moister from the Valley Independent Sentinel. We're going to do a special podcast this week in commemoration of the anniversary of the flood of 1955, which is August 18th. We decided to listen to a record, Flood of 55, that was produced after the flood. It was brought in by Shelton resident Chad Jansen. It's owned by his brother Derek, and he was kind enough to come down today and let us listen to it. So we've set up a record player in the office, and we're listening to it for the first time. And we're going to put it into 9-minute segments so we can put it up in different videos. And we'll start with the first one now.
We take you now to news editor George Phillips for the latest report on the rising floodwaters.
The swollen waters of the Naugatuck River are raising havoc with life and property from north to south. Torrington and Winstead in the northwestern part of the state are isolated and in a state of emergency as evacuation of hundreds of families continues. National Guardsmen and state police, with Red Cross officials and civil defense workers, are doing all they can to combat the raging torrents. So far, no casualties have been reported in that general area, but reports are meager because there is no direct communication. WAVZ's George Lazat is standing by in Waterbury, where a state of emergency also exists. Water in parts of Waterbury measures 7 feet. Power and other utilities are out. Drinking water must be boiled.
The day was August 19th, 1955. A day stamped in the memories of thousands because it changed the course of their lives. This is the story of that day, just as we told it while events were unfolding. Of course, that makes it also the story of what a radio station does when disaster strikes. It's the kind of job, as you'll see, that could only be done by radio. The textbooks call it radio journalism. Put simply, we brought awareness of the menace and the ravages of the merciless flood into thousands of homes, automobiles, stores, and factories where Greater New Haven listened and responded. And so, this becomes, too, the chronicle of how Greater New Haven and Connecticut mobilized to rescue and to rebuild. This story could be that of Americans in 6 other states that day who faced the flood. For too many people, this day was a tragedy. But the record of the valiant makes it a thrilling story, too, a story we think you will want to keep as a permanent record. Let's get on with it. My name is Tiny Markle, but I don't figure in the story until later. It began through the voice of WAVZ's news editor, George Phillips.
New Haven Civil Defense Director Robert Corley has called for volunteers and small boats to help evacuate residents of the Torrington area in the northwestern part of the state. If you can help, please call Fulton 7.
We sign on at 5:30 every morning. George Phillips, coming in to prepare his first newscast of that day, could tell immediately that a big story was in the making. Every phone in the office was ringing. The Associated Press ticker brought news of trouble in Torrington, Connecticut. And then came a call from George Lazat. It was the first of many calls broadcast from George, a WAVZ staff man who lives in neighboring Waterbury. At 5:25 a.m., the civilian defense siren broke the roar of an all-night downpour. His instinctive reaction was to cover and call WAVZ.
This is George Lazat reporting to you from Waterbury, and we'd like to tell you what has happened so far this morning. As far as we have been able to determine, in the last 15 or 20 minutes, all is confusion here in the city. This much we know at the moment. Mayor Raymond D. Snyder has declared a state of emergency. There has been a dam that has given way in the Waterville section of the city, and the city's key Huntington Avenue Bridge has been swept away by the floodwaters of the Naugatuck River.
Yes, that was the first of many calls from George Lazat. In another, he told of the first known casualty in the storm, a 4-year-old girl.
Well, here is how it happened just about 10 minutes ago. Firemen from Truck 3, who have been risking their lives since 2 o'clock this morning on the North Riverside Street area of Waterbury, were using their truck to take people from the 2nd and 3rd floors of those houses on North Riverside Street. They had taken the mother and the father of this young girl down the ladder across to Summit Street, where they were safe on high ground. The two firemen on the ladder were passing the young girl, the 4-year-old girl, from one fireman to another, when suddenly the ladder shifted. Either the ground gave way below it, or it moved in some unexplained manner. The fireman and the 4-year-old girl were thrown from the ladder, and they fell into the current, which they tell me was traveling at about 45 miles an hour through the Riverside Street section. A man who was standing in the group of spectators, about 50 people saw this. Many of them said, "My God, they're gone, all of them." When the youngster fell in the water, a man had to be forcibly restrained from leaping into the water to see if he could get the little girl. But she was already out of sight, floating down Riverside Street toward...
You know, the importance of news changes, depending on what competes with it. Tragedy was still remote from New Haven. The troubles of other parts of the world still took up time.
Across the world, flash floods have destroyed or inundated thousands of houses in Japan's northernmost island.
But then, it came closer.
A check with Naugatuck police finds that town in serious trouble. Sergeant Joseph Suma talked to WAVZ this morning while in knee-deep water at headquarters. Police headquarters has since been moved to the Naugatuck High School. Several feet of water is reported in downtown Naugatuck, and the worst is yet to come. National Guardsmen and state police are assisting Naugatuck in the emergency. Volunteers and owners of small boats are needed all along the Naugatuck Valley. Contact your nearest civil defense office. Due to the flood conditions in Ansonia, the American Brass Company in that town will be closed until further notice.
The voice of George Phillips struck just the right note. Calm and reassuring, it built confidence where needed that help was coming. It roused others to rescue work. As the crisis mounted, WAVZ's general manager, Daniel W. Copps, dug in at a typewriter and a telephone, trying to keep up with the affected areas and feeding the reports to George Phillips.
In Ansonia, the uncontrollable waters have advanced from the lower areas to threaten virtually the entire city. Police say that water is seeping down Main Street at 10 miles an hour. In many sections, boats have been needed to evacuate people from their homes. Boats collected from elsewhere in the state are arriving there now, and evacuation is progressing. Most of the evacuees are being taken to the Ansonia Armory. Mayor Lee conferred with Mayor Snyder of Waterbury this morning, and 14 New Haven policemen have been sent to that town.
You know, we never realize how much our feeling of security depends on having perfect communications with our fellow man. We could detect the strain in the voices of the telephone operators trying to keep up the connections between comfortable, everyday living and complete devastation. And the communications were breaking down. Somehow, we managed to get through to Seymour, no longer able to make outgoing calls.
In Seymour, a trestle is down and a bridge is in danger of being washed up. Seymour police asked WAVZ to alert Woodbridge firefighters to stand by in case they're needed. It's impossible to call out of Seymour, though they are receiving incoming call.
And we lost contact with Seymour. The words of Sergeant Soma, knee-deep in water, were the last words we knew from Naugatuck. But worst of all, there had been no way to get through to Torrington or to Winsted, Connecticut for hours. What was happening to life and property there was unknown to the outside world. The only thing we knew how to do was to keep on trying. Overland communications were closing off as well. Most of the highways were now washed out. From Les Tyler, the New Haven Railroad's busy information officer, came word of trains out of action.